it, but we the ones who late. Now family, we the ones who gotta delegate. Get that money in the power, never be fake. Stick to cosign for 3. What did he say? Create jobs, support our own. Educate the same and buy back your home. Got 3 degrees, triple 10. 3 PhDs, now we on the CNN. DBTV, let's talk about negligence. Ignorance is bliss, but we can turn it to intelligence. Believe none of what you hear, half of what you see. Let's break it down here on Dr. Boyce TV. Here we are.
In order to get there. In order for me to make that transformation, one of the things I found was when I was teaching at Syracuse University, I remember that I did not know that even as a PhD, I was stuck with kind of a slave mentality. I was in a situation where my brain was not equipped for freedom. I was still a better fit for slavery. You know, and I had to acknowledge that, and I didn't know that because I thought, educated Negroes were doing well. I thought that I was one of those so-called successful black people, right? I did not know that I was such a fit for slavery until I had an honest conversation with myself. And let me tell you how I became a slave. I became a slave because I was trained to be one from birth. From the time I was little, I had a little bit of an inkling of kind of what it means to grow your money. My grandmother used to buy me these savings bonds. I talk about my grandmother all the time. She died right here in Atlanta. She's buried just a few miles from here, actually. And so every time I'm here, I always think about her, because she was that first person to introduce me to compound interest, which I didn't know at the time was going to be so significant, but it became very significant in my life. But outside of that, the whole conversation around money was pretty basic. It was, if you want to make money, you do what? You get a job. That's how you make money. And when you get the job, you have to know how to behave. Don't upset Massa because he will cut your food supply. He will cut off your money, and then you'll be destitute. And then you'll realize that there are consequences for being black and outspoken or whatever it is, right? So I also kind of remember watching people that went to work every day and how they hated their jobs. So I kind of felt like, okay, so part of being an adult means that you have to go to this place that you don't enjoy, that you're going to come home and complain about every day. And then also I saw this weird cycle when it came to money, where it's you go to work, you make enough money to pay your bills, and then you run out of money, and then you go back to work to get more money to pay the bills again, and then you run out of money, and then you just rinse and repeat. Just repeat that cycle over and over again until you're too old to work, and then you eventually just die. And then your children start over exactly where you started, right? There was rarely any conversation I heard anywhere about the pillars of wealth, about an equation to kind of emancipate yourself from all of this. I didn't know what that even looked like. I did not even know that even existed. I did not hear any conversations at all about stock market investing, not at all. When I started learning about stock market investing as a college student, it was all theory. It was all something white people did. Even then, even when the knowledge was presented to me, and I was a very good finance student, I had very good grades and all that stuff. Even when it was presented to me, it just wasn't really real. I knew I could do it. I understood it, but it was all theory. And that really sort of speaks to the power of habits. It's almost like when I was, I don't know if you guys know, I've lost a lot of weight maybe in the last year and a half, but it's not like I just figured out a year and a half ago that exercise would help me lose weight. I've always known that. I've always known that having Skittles and Twizzlers in your diet was probably not the best thing for a 40-year-old man, right? I've always known these things, right? This is not rocket science. This was not something like a revelation. It was something I always knew. And what I learned is that habits actually override intellect and knowledge and logic. How many of us most of the time spend our lives, every day we know what we're supposed to do, and then you see what you actually do or what you want to do or what feels good at the moment, right? That's probably about how, half the kids on this earth are born that way, right? You wasn't supposed to do it, but you did it anyway, right? Now you got child support, whatever it is, right? That's life. It's life. It's the power of habits. That's how it works. And so what I learned was that through my journey of sort of following one pathway I thought that would give me economic strength and freedom, which was through extensive amounts of education, going to school, getting more school, I didn't realize that my habit formation was built around extensive training on how to be a slave. And I thought that I was heading toward freedom when really I was going down a pathway of more extensive forms of slavery, more deeply entrenched slavery, right? I was becoming more and more committed to the very system that we complain about on a daily basis. And this was not something that just happened overnight. It was something that happened from when I was 5 and went to kindergarten and elementary school, where they start teaching you that white people are the greatest thing in the world and that they've done everything significant, and that the greatest sign of success for a person of color in America, or a black person, is to get close to white folks and to get them to like you so they'll give you money for being well behaved, right? That's kind of what it is. I call it the good Negro behavior protocol. If you follow that, then you know there are rewards that come with that. Right? This goes back to slavery. It was what Dr. Claude Anderson in Powernomics refers to as meritorious manumission, where slaves were always rewarded for protecting their masters, entertaining their masters, etc. Oh, and also the biggest reward came for undermining any slave that was trying to defeat the system. Any slave that was trying to escape or form a rebellion, if you went and snitched on their slave, then they would take good care of you. There was some Negro that was so appreciated by his town in Virginia that when they had a revolt, he told the local law enforcement. They went and shut down the revolt, killed all the slaves that were about to do it, and they loved this Negro so much they put a statue of him up in the middle of town. And this statue was up until I think the 1960s and 1970s. That's how real it was, right? So ultimately, if you are black and you want white people to build you a statue, then you pretty much know what the formula is. It's very simple, very basic, right? So the question is, which formula do you want, right? Do we want the formula that's been given to us, that's been sort of established for the last 400 years? Or do we create a different formula? Do we want the old equation or a new equation, right? And so for me, as I sort of analyzing my own extensive slave training, everything that made me into what I was before I figured a few things out, I started saying, okay, I need a formula that's going to get me away from all of this shit. I need something that's going to be different. I need something that's going to break some rules. I need something that's going to probably upset a lot of my relatives because they were warning me against it. I mean, think about this. I mean, I was a black man with a good job. Like, you don't mess up a good job going off trying to do this independent black stuff. I mean, my goodness, who wants to be black, right? And so it was really difficult. I had to kind of do a lot of soul searching, figure things out, gain some courage, and also break some habits, confront some habits, right? Confront some uncomfortable truths about who I was. And I break all that down for you because I want you to understand that much of this process of going from what they call a wantrepreneur to an entrepreneur is a scenario where it's going to require you to do a lot of soul searching, and it's an emotional process as much as it is an intellectual and logical process. I mean, let's just be real. Let's keep it real. Look, everything you need to know to go start a great company and to build one and grow one is out there. You know where the knowledge and the information is. You know who the gurus are. You know which classes to go take. You know you can turn on the internet, and if you spend 10 hours a day doing nothing but studying business and reading about investing, you could be really good at all of that very, very quickly, right? Just the same way I always knew that if I got off my fat ass and went running every day, I was going to lose weight. If I put down the Skittles and picked up some vegetables, it was going to make a difference in my body. But remember, there's a reason why I did not do that, even though I knew what I was supposed to do, what I needed to do, what I wanted to do. I wanted this for myself, but at the same time, I wanted something else, that was related to habit formation and instant gratification. It's always comfortable to stick with what you know. I mean, that's why we all stay in bad relationships. If you haven't done it before, then you are human. All of us have done that. Been in a bad relationship and stayed in it because it was comfortable and familiar. Some of y'all are in relationships like that right now. I apologize to the person who will be your ex within the next few weeks after you hear this conversation. So how do we do that? How do you break away from this abusive marriage with white supremacy that you have? You love this system. You love all of it. This is who you were born and trained to be. Some of us, many of us. Right? How do you deal with this abusive marriage, and how do you form a process that will allow you to take those steps necessary to put yourself where you want to be, where you become an asset to your people, you become a greater asset to your family, right? Where you've got a legacy, my God, a legacy, and it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. Whatever legacy you leave is going to be huger than you can imagine. And let me tell you why. My grandmother, rest her soul, who's buried 5 miles away from here, I mean, she's in heaven, and I hope that she can watch. I hope she's got Wi-Fi in heaven or something with big screen TVs, because they tell us all these great things that happen when you die, right? So I hope that she can see how significant her legacy is when I'm speaking to all of you, and I'm speaking with her voice, the voice she gave me in the 1970s and 80s when she was buying me those financial toys and educational gifts for Christmas instead of just buying me the same old okey doke stuff, right? And this is the beginning. This is the beginning. I mean, think about what you're teaching your children because of the things that you might have heard from me or from other people that you see at this conference. Every day when I'm online, every week, I'm talking to about 1 million people a week. And it's shaping their thinking. And all this came from my grandmother's tiny little legacy, her tiny little thing that she did years ago. And this is not the only example. This is not the only example. There are tons of examples out here where somebody did something in 1945 that they thought wasn't going to be a big deal, and it ended up being a huge deal. So I need you to do something. I need you to make sure that you're doing something that, even if it's not a big deal to you, is going to be a huge deal to somebody else. Most of y'all have a line of thinking. You're doing something in your life. You have something that exists in your life that is huge to you, that was small to the person who gave that to you. Good or bad, right? Because you got families where they have generations of abuse. And maybe to the abuser, it wasn't a big deal when that man touched his niece or whatever it was. But it became huge later on. Well, the same effect applies in a positive direction. Little things you do, little things you put in position, that little life insurance policy that you get, whatever it is, that little business that you start, those little concepts and ideas that you teach in your household, that decision to take your child out of public school and homeschool your child or send them to an African center school. Those little decisions you make are going to have a huge impact. So never underestimate the power of you and what you are and what you're doing right now. The best way to control the future is when you prepare for it, when the future is when you're still in the past. Or the best way to control the present is when you have prepared for the present, back when the present used to be the future. The people that control 2018 are the people who were planning for it in 1988. Just go look at gentrification. Look at gentrification. I mean, do you think that they just started preparing gentrification plans last Tuesday? No, they were talking about this in the 70s, in the 80s. They said by 2018, we're going to have billions of dollars in extra wealth, right? So planning ahead is the key to everything. It's the key to everything. So let me give you some specific information that's going to help you in that transformation. Some things that I learned, things I figured out along the way. I'm going to start with mainly the 3 pillars, the 3 pillars of wealth. The 3 pillars of wealth that you want to understand are stock and bond investing, real estate, and entrepreneurship. Each of those 3 areas is very basic, 3 very basic ideas, but each of them goes extremely deep. Each of them can go extremely deep. So when we teach our children in the Black Millionaires of Tomorrow program, in the Black Business School, what we tell our kids is the same thing we would tell any adult, because these kids are going to be adults one day. We tell them to keep your poise. Poise is P-O-I-S-E, P-O-I-S-E. P-O-I-S-E stands for producer, owner, investor, saver, entrepreneur. Producer, owner, investor, saver, entrepreneur. What does that mean? Why do we tell them that? Why do we remind them of that? Well, because you see, capitalism in America is what you would call a horse and jockey type of race. And everybody's in the race. But some people are horses, some of us are jockeys, right? Think about the way a horse race works. The jockey gets on the horse's back, and the jockey don't really do much work. He just smacks the horse and tells the horse what to do. And if the horse runs fast, then the horse wins the race. And when the race is over, they don't give the money to the horse. All the rewards go to the jockey. The horse gets sent back to the stable to get his hay or whatever it is. The jockey is the one who gets the glory. The jockey is the one who gets the wreath around the neck. The jockey is the one who gets the big payday, right? Well, capitalism is a horse and jockey system in the same way. There's a massive amount of wealth being created in America. There is a wealth divide in America unlike anything we've seen in the last 100 years. That wealth divide, the divide between the haves and the have-nots, is not going to shrink. It is not going to go backwards. They are not going to be able to undo this. They have opened up that rabbit hole, that Pandora's box, and eventually America will have the same wealth disparities that they have in many third world countries, where you've got the 1% and then you've got everybody else. That divide is not going to go anywhere. I don't care what the politicians tell you. I don't care what dreams they feed, the Democrat Party, liberals, all of that. That's not going to work. None of it's going to work, because these wealth gaps in pretty much every country, when they occur, they don't usually go backward. The only way they might go backward is if there's complete revolution and the whole society just descends into chaos, at which point you should just go buy a bunch of guns, learn to grow your own food, and build a bomb shelter or something, because it's a whole different game at that point, right? But truth be told, these gaps do not shrink. And the way these gaps work is in that horse and jockey context. You've got the people that accumulate wealth, and then those who build wealth for the accumulators. So, for example, if you grow up like I did, and you're thinking, okay, I need a place to live. Well, how do I get a place to live? Well, you can go rent an apartment. Okay, who do you rent an apartment from? You rent an apartment from a landlord. Okay, all right. Well, so you're paying rent to the landlord every month, and y'all know how that game works. The rent money, you don't get it back. We know that, right? The landlord takes that money because the landlord is the jockey. You're the horse, so you're feeding the landlord's wealth. You're giving them $1,000, $2,000 a month, whatever you pay in rent. They're taking that money and they're putting it into the value of their property, which takes that seed you've given them and they've positioned it to grow. So now that seed is going to grow through what they call capital gains, which are taxed at a much lower rate than regular income. Investors pay much lower taxes than regular working people, thanks to Ronald Reagan. Again, they opened the Pandora's box during Reaganomics. They didn't go backward. They didn't shut it again, right? So they're accumulating this wealth through capital gains, in addition to the fact that now he owns the building and he gets whatever price appreciation comes from the growth in value of the building, and he's making income from the building the entire time. So his tenants are all paying his mortgage, which is allowing him to build wealth for his family. So basically, if you're paying, say, $1,500 a month in rent, and you do that for a 20-year period, you have made your landlord a millionaire. If your landlord takes that $1,500 and they invest that money in either real estate or stocks and bonds, they can easily take that $1,500 a month and turn that into a $1 million asset. Now, contrast this, pay attention. There's a lot of people out here that pay up to $1,500 a month in rent, sometimes more, who swear up and down that they don't have any wealth, who swear up and down that they can never become a millionaire. Like, it's not possible. I don't know how to do it. I was born poor, so I'm supposed to die poor. Well, if you can't make yourself a millionaire, how is it that you can make somebody else a millionaire? That doesn't make any sense, right? It's almost like when the Black Panther movie came out, and there are people that say the black people can't afford to build our own school system because it would cost hundreds of millions of dollars to build our own schools. And I said, but Disney, we raised $500 million for Disney in about 3 weeks. They gave us entertainment, and we gave them $500 million. And they're not giving that money back. That's money that literally is like we took a bunch of money and we put it in the toilet and we flushed it down the toilet and then said, damn, I ain't got no money. It's hard being black out here. I mean, think about this. You give your money away and then you complain about the fact that you have no money. So who should you be mad at? Are you mad at the person who took your money? Well, no, you hand me money, I'm gonna take it, right? Or should we be mad at ourselves and kind of say, well, maybe we need to rethink this thing, right? So real estate. So basically, jumping beyond real estate, the other area, stocks and bonds. Let me talk about that for a second. The second pillar of wealth. When it comes to stocks and bonds, when they look at the studies, what they find is that when they study this gap, everybody's obsessed with this growing wealth gap in America. And everybody's like, how is this happening? How are the 1% getting all the darn resources? Like, by golly, how is this occurring? This is outrageous. You know, right? They're confused. They don't get it. They're like, what the hell's going on? You know, and so when the scientists, the financial scientists, you know, people that do what I do, when they look at the data, what they find is that the number one driving factor in the difference in the growing gap between the rich and the poor is the fact that people that have more money or an investor's mindset are putting their money in the stock market, and they're doing it on a regular basis. And what's happened is that the last 30 or 40 years, the stock market has shot up like a rocket. And that is not a recent trend. The stock market has been doing that for about 100 years. Even the Great Depression was an excellent opportunity to invest and buy everything as cheap as possible, because all those assets went up in value. So basically, the brother John Rogers in Chicago wrote a great article about this. He's a billionaire. He's a black billionaire out of Chicago. He said that when the 2007 stock market crash hit and many black folks got scared and took their money out, he said we probably gave away $2 or $3 trillion in wealth that would have been accumulated if we'd been taught to wait out the storm, if we just held steady and remained consistent. There's a guy, Warren Buffett is a really good investor, and one of the things Warren Buffett did to show the power of compound interest, and he's a big believer in stock market investing, but he does all different kinds of investing. One of the things that he did was he showed how he invested $113 in 1942, and now that $113 is worth about $450,000. And at the time he hits the 100-year mark, that money has grown 100 years. It'll be, I think, $6 million. $6 million. Just wealth out of nowhere. So think about this again. Remember I told you how little things turn to big things? So imagine if you are black and you live in 1942 and you don't have much to leave your children or grandchildren because you're thinking, I ain't got much money, I ain't got much education, I ain't got much of nothing. But let's say somebody convinces you to to gather as a family $113, which wouldn't back then, it wouldn't buy you a car or anything. It might buy you a raggedy used car, but not a good car, right? So it's not as if we couldn't do that, right? So you gathered $113, you put it in the stock market. 100 years later, that's $6 million for your great grandchildren, right? That's huge. That's a game changer for them. I mean, how many of you would have a life that changed tomorrow if you had somebody that left you $6 million? Even if you had to split it with your cousins, that would still be a lot of money. Right? So again, the little things turn into the big things. So I want you to always ask yourself, maybe I can't do the big things, but what are the little things I can do? There's a brother that was in my class the other day that was we were talking. We meet a couple times a week, and he was talking about a beautiful plan he has to transform the entire black community and build a school system and make it extremely profitable and reinvest the funds and do all these amazing things and just flip the whole black community on its head. And I said, that's amazing, man. I hope you do it. I'm so excited for this plan. This is awesome, but I need you to just do the little stuff first. Show me the little stuff, because the thing is that we can talk all day about the big stuff, and I hear big talk all the time, but I'm not impressed with the big talk. I'm impressed with the little actions, because what happens is the little actions give you the confidence to eventually pursue bigger actions, and then next thing you know, you're doing the big stuff, right? Before you can hit the half-court shots, you got to just practice and hit the little layups. You know, you shoot, you have a bad shooting day, you're LeBron and you're shooting shots and you're missing all your shots. Well, LeBron might get back in his rhythm by just hitting some layups and free throws, and then he might start scooting back away from the basket. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to focus on the little stuff. The little stuff is what gets you there. If you were to walk out this door right now and somebody gave you marching orders to walk to California, you could get to California, but you're not going to get there in one big step. You're going to take a 100, 10 million, whatever, a million tiny steps. And then one day you'll be looking in front of you and the Pacific Ocean will be right there. It's the little stuff that makes the difference. The real leaders in the black community, in my opinion, from what I have observed, are the people that are doing the little things every day. Why are the little things important? The little things matter because the little things also keep you from being overwhelmed. You don't want to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders every day and just be stressed out over all the things that you feel like you can't do because you don't have enough capital and I don't have enough money to do this and do that. To hell with all that. To hell with all that. Start with the little stuff. The little stuff will open the door to the bigger stuff. At least that was my journey. I had to start with the little stuff. Now I can do bigger stuff, but there's bigger stuff I want to do. I can't do that yet. So every day I still got to do the little stuff relative to where I want to be one day in the future. Third pillar of wealth, entrepreneurship. Real estate, stock and bond investing, entrepreneurship. Every person in the black community who cares about the future of black America must be committed to the idea of understanding at least the fundamentals of entrepreneurship. Everybody doesn't have to go run a business, but everybody should know all the different ways you can be an investor in a business. Also, entrepreneurship is critically important for the community because we have been controlled by others because we are overly committed to a system that does not work to our benefit. And this thing that we call racism, which is very, very real, is actually, more specifically, this idea that you're walking into somebody else's institution and not comfortable with or don't understand why they don't treat you as if you are similar to the people who own the building in the first place, right? You're walking into somebody else's house and wonder why they're not treating you like a relative. Now, again, we built America. We know this. We know that we own a percentage of this country. We should fight for reparations. I believe in all of that. I support all of that. But again, I also believe white people ain't never going to stop being white. I don't believe that they're ever going to willing to give up the $13-14 trillion that they really owe us. I don't believe that. I just don't. So when I started thinking about racism, and I would think about, I would get tempted to get in these depressing internal dialogues about how hard it is to be a black man, and just how everything's stacked against you, and how white folks will only let you go so far. And I started really thinking about it, and I said, I'm trying to solve this problem within the box of white supremacy. If I try to solve white supremacy within the box of white supremacy, then I'll never come up with an adequate solution. The only solution I can come up with is lay down and be still and be quiet and make sure you're well behaved so that you can survive this system. But then I realized, wait a minute, you can actually walk out the door, and systems are designed, systems are built. This system that you're in was built by somebody. And so why don't we as a community commit to training millions of our children on how to develop and build systems? In this room, the people in this room, if we were all adequately trained on developing systems and organizations and corporations, we could develop a system that sustains and employs and feeds and takes care of every single person in here. We would not have to walk outside this room to get what we needed if we understood the basics of how to develop a system. How do you develop an organizational structure? How do you fill out the paperwork necessary to file for, to become an LLC? How do you hold meetings, and how do you structure your employee handbooks and all that stuff? Why are our children not learning this at an early age? I mean, think about this. What is it? I don't understand this. There's about 18,000 hours of life that a child lives between the age of 6 and 18. They spend 18,000 hours, I think, or actually they spend about 18,000 hours in school or something ridiculous like that. Why is it not in those 18,000 hours, there's not at least 200 or 300 of those hours spent training our children on how to prepare for the future, how to develop systems so they can escape white supremacy? You see, so ultimately, when you look at an obstacle like that, an obstacle like racism, I mean, you could fight through it, you could overcome it, or you can get the fuck away from it, excuse my French. You just leave. Just leave. I mean, look throughout history. Look at people in the past who have been oppressed. There are people that have had to just get up and fight and die and bleed and everything else, and that's powerful. That's extraordinary. That's incredibly brave. But then there are some people who just said, let's just pack up our stuff and go. The Mormons. I'll give you an example. The Mormons. These are some impressive white people. They were out east, and they were being mistreated. They were being oppressed because they were Mormons. And so there was this guy, the leader, Brigham Young, who gathered about 250 families and said, let's just go west. Let's just pack our covered wagons and go west to the Great Salt Lake. There's nothing out there but freedom. There's nothing out there but opportunity to build our own. It's going to be hard. We won't have much. There are no jobs. There's no McDonald's along the way. There's nothing out there. But if we can make this work, it'll be ours. So he got these families together, 250 of them, and they all started going out west looking for this Great Salt Lake. And at that time, going west was a really scary thing. About literally a third of the families died. Like, just from illness, getting killed by animals, or some of the Native Americans out there, they didn't want them out there, right? So they were really dealing with it. But a few of them got out there. The last third got out there. And when they got there, again, there was no jobs to go apply for. There was no schools to go enroll your kids in. None of that. There's no government, no nothing. So they just planted some potatoes so they could eat. And then they said, well, we need a bank. So they would set up a bank. It'd be like a little damn near cardboard box or whatever, but they set up a little bank and they put a sign that said, write the word bank on it, and that's the bank, right? And then somebody would become the dentist, and the guy that's the dentist is maybe a guy who knows how to put on horseshoes, so he knows how to hammer a horse's foot, so he's like, well, I can do teeth too, right? It was real sloppy. It was really ghetto in terms of how they set it up, but there was just sort of this idea that's like, well, this is ours. It's going to be what we make it into, and we're going to make it into something great, but it's going to take time. So let's start with the little things, and the little things can become the big things. So they start with the little things, and they need a university. So they open up a Brigham Young University and some other schools eventually. And now if you go out there to Salt Lake City, you see one of the wealthiest cities on earth, one of the wealthiest cities on the entire planet, that started off with a group of people who just said, we don't want to be persecuted anymore. Let's pack up our stuff and go. Right? So I think that for us as black people, I think our best option in all of this, in this white supremacy thing, is to pack up our stuff and go. So with your children, you're complaining about the public schools and why the public schools are doing your kids dirty and all that stuff. We know this, right? They don't know how to train a black boy how to be on how to be a black man. It's not in their incentive to do that. So you just pack up your stuff and go. Okay, come on. Let's get out of this school, right? You don't like your job, you know, they're mistreating you on the job or whatever. Well, you find a way to pack your stuff and you go, right? You don't like the media, well, you pack your stuff and you go. You say, I'm going to support black media. I'm just going to get my media from black people, right? Every single system that bothers you or oppresses you or makes you uncomfortable, you always have the option of packing your stuff and go. Now, why do most people not do this? Well, for the same reason that not every Mormon was ready to get in that covered wagon and go to the Great Salt Lake. Because the journey ain't for everybody. Some people are scared, and it's okay for them to be scared. Maybe they'll come in a generation. Once other people found out how good they were doing out west, well, guess what? Other people started to follow. Other people started to follow. And I know this feeling. I remember this feeling when I was first kind of doing this thing. I wasn't the first one to do what I did, but I kind of felt by myself. You know, I didn't have much support. My own family didn't get it. My colleagues, I hung with these hoity-toity Negroes with doctorates and stuff, and they thought I was crazy because they were like, oh, you're going to get blackballed. If you keep talking this black stuff, they're not going to hire you anywhere. And I was listening to this thinking, man, yeah, you're right. I won't have a job anywhere, so I better do this right. And so I just said, well, I said, you know what? But one thing I know is that I can't live like this anymore. I can't live like this. This is going to kill me. Black, you think there's no connection between racism, white supremacy on the job and the fact that black men die earlier than anybody else? That's all that stress. That's that hypertension. I met a black man who was a successful Negro. He had an MBA, he worked at a bank or whatever. And he said the stress on his job was tearing his body up so bad that he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, I don't know how to explain this, but all the testosterone in your body has disappeared. I've never heard that before. Like he literally, are we talking about emasculation, right? Taking away his manhood. he said he had no testosterone. So he was having hot flashes and sleeping all day, and he couldn't perform for his wife because, you need the testosterone to, get out of attention. You know what I'm talking about, right? He couldn't do that. He couldn't do any of that. And he said, so the best day of his life actually was when he got fired from his job. And he said that's when he started regaining his sanity. Now, the interesting thing was that the kicker for me, the thing that she showed me that really made me determined to keep moving forward was he didn't even know he was giving me this lesson at the time. He just thought we were just talking. But I was sitting there kind of like, damn, I don't want to end up like that. And he comes downstairs and he shows me this big basket of pills that he has to take just to keep his body, his chemicals balanced and his mind right after going through this ordeal of dealing with the stress of racism on the job. So yes, racism will drive you crazy. Racism will kill you. So if you want to be safe, just for your own health, you gotta pack up your stuff and go. And what you'll find too is that when you leave, the amount of money that you need to make to feel comfortable being free is not the same as you needed to make to feel comfortable being a slave, right? You'll find, like, let's say you leave your job and you were making $70,000 or something like that, and then you go off and you're doing your own thing and you're pulling in, you pull $30,000 this year or whatever. Yeah, it's a little tight, but it's not so tight that you're gonna be like, okay, I gotta go back to that job now. I gotta go back to because once you know freedom, you can't go backwards. Anybody know what I'm talking about? How many of you, seriously, once you know freedom, you can't go back, right? Because you're finding out like, oh my goodness, I remember that feeling. I remember thinking, man, okay, so this is how the other half lives. Like, this is all the great stuff that happens in your life when you're not spending all your time. The majority of your life, literally about 40.2% of your waking hours on this earth are spent at your job if you work a 9 to 5. If you add it up, let's say you do 40 hours a week. Well, if you do that for 50 weeks a year, that's about 2,000 hours a year. So do that over a decade, that's 20,000 hours. So over a 40-year career, that's 80,000 hours. So most are spending spend between 80 and 100,000 hours at our job. So when you're free from that, you literally have another 80 to 100,000 hours, which is almost like living to 150 years old. You have an extra 80 to 100,000 hours that you get to spend with your kids. An extra 80 to 100,000 hours where you get to have conversations with your parents before they get old and they die, right? Another 80 to 100,000 hours you get to spend traveling and living life and doing the things that you always wanted to do. That's the real reward. The money is not bad. Like once you figure out how to make the money, that'll be like a nice icing on the cake. So once I started making more money, it was like, yeah, this is what's up. This is cool, right? But the money is not what you'll enjoy the most about the freedom. It's the freedom itself is the reward. And I'm not kidding. That was my journey. That was my experience. And I had a special lesson on this week. You know, my yesterday morning, I woke up, I looked at my phone, and I had a text message from my father. He sent a text message to me, my brother, and my sister, and he said, your Uncle Charles was killed last night in a car crash. And I was looking at the text, and you know, you get a message and it just doesn't seem real. And I was like, am I really reading this? Like, I'm just staring at like this doesn't even seem real. And my Uncle Charles, and you know, we were very much alike. He was my one relative. There were two men that I knew when I was a baby, not including my father. He wasn't around. But my two uncles, and both of them, he's the last uncle left. The other one died in 2012 from typical black male problems. He had a typical struggling black male life, if you can imagine what that looks like, and he died young. And then this was my last one. So, and he was the most like me. So watching him die was like watching myself die. You know, I don't know if anybody's had that experience when somebody just like you dies in a car crash. So you can imagine how that feels and imagine how they would feel if they knew that was going to happen to them. And I started really thinking about it, you know, and it bothered me because, you know, I said, man, death is such a horrible, inconvenient thing in the sense that it doesn't really care, you know, what you got planned for next week. You know, it doesn't care how many more years you thought you was going to have. You know, it doesn't care like what you're going to do that day. You know, that day was his 41st wedding anniversary. And he had just talked to his wife, my Aunt Janice, about what they were going to do that night. And so 3 hours go by. He isn't home. It takes him 20 minutes to get home from work. So of course she's worried about the worst and finds out the worst. And then on top of that, you know, that same day, my grandmother, I told you, was buried here in Atlanta. You know, it was her birthday. So we were already feeling some kind of way because it's grandma's birthday. And then on top of that, it's his anniversary. And then a week later, his wife's birthday is 1 week after that, and his sister's birthday is on the same day. So it was this crazy, you know, just sort of tornado of thoughts that kind of came through when I was just sort of thinking, like, this is unbelievable, and it's so unfair, and it's so sad, sick, and ridiculous. You know, life plays these cruel jokes on you where you really think you're in control of things, and you find out that you're not. And I thought about conversations I had with him through the years. And I remember us having a conversation one day at Applebee's, and we were just sitting there talking. And we were talking about, you know, financial stuff, you know, and he was talking about his credit, how his credit score hadn't been what he wanted it to be, and how he'd had some financial setbacks. And he was talking about how he was going to try to fix those things. And I was like, well, you know, you're old, you know, and he said, yeah, but it's hard to start all over when you're almost 50 years old. And I said, yeah, but you know, you don't know how much time you have, and whatever time you have, that's all you got. And it'd be nice if you were 20, but you're not. So you can't just let things go just because you're 50 and not 25. Like, what does that mean? What does that, you do the best you can with what you got and where you at. That's what you do. Wherever you at, you just start where you're at and you do the best you can with what you got right now. And he was on board with that. It wasn't like we were having an argument about it. It was just, I remember having that opinion, like, it's okay. You know, it's going to be fine. Just move forward. Take good steps. Do the little things. Do the right things. So here it is, you know, 12, 13 years later. I doubt if he knew he was going to die like this, so inconveniently. But that same week, he had achieved that goal of improving his credit score. And he and his wife had just, and again, this is tragic. It's tragic yet inspirational. It depends on how you look at it, which side of the glass you're going to look at. But the tragedy is that he and his wife had just bought a brand new house. And it was so new that they hadn't even moved in completely. They were sleeping on the floor. That's how new the house was. So that's the sad part. But to me, the triumph is that conversation, he made that comeback. You know, he got that credit together, he got that money together, and he is able to leave this beautiful legacy for his family. Again, you don't know when you're going to get taken to the next level, but he prepared it. He went out like a man. He did it right. He did it right, right? So ultimately, what I will say to you is that you don't know how much time you have on this earth. And this is going to be pretty much all you got based on what we know. And I'm going to tell you this. I really believe that in this generation, we have an opportunity as a community, all of us in this space who are a part of this movement, the We Buy Black movement, the Black Economic Empowerment movement, all of us who are in this movement, we have our shot at greatness. But yet, if we spend most of our time thinking about the despair and the challenges that come with being black, we're going to miss all of that. What you do is you realize that, yes, it sucks to be 25 points behind in the game, but that gives you a chance to have one of the greatest comebacks in history. Yeah. So you got to go out here, line up, run the offense with complete precision, and show these people why we are the original man, why we are the survivors of the Middle Passage. White folks couldn't have survived all of that, right? It was 250 years of slavery. We came out smiling and shining after 250 years of the worst slavery known to man. We went through 100 years of Jim Crow. We went through 40 years of mass incarceration. And we are still extraordinary people, right? So I say we tap into that and build something that's amazing and truly do what you would say, to use a corny phrase, you know, make black people great again. Because that's what we are, right? You know, it sounds like it's a Donald Trump thing, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. So to summarize, let me give you something that you can write down. I didn't know if this was like supposed to be instructional or just me talking to you, but either way, I hope you benefit from this conversation. And if we have time, I'll definitely do a Q&A with you guys. With the students, with the kids in our Black Millionaires of Tomorrow program, we tell them to keep your poise, P-O-I-S-E. That stands for producer, owner, investor, saver, entrepreneur. That's where you teach your kids early. That's what you talk to your family about. Because on the other side of poise are the horses, right? If you keep your poise, you get to be the jockey. But you lose your poise, you become the horse, right? On the other side of the producer is the consumer. On the other side of the owner is the renter, right? The investors and savers are contradicted by the spenders and borrowers. The entrepreneurs they're riding the employees, unfortunately, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't be these things. It doesn't mean you don't, all of us are consumers sometimes, but we shouldn't be consumers all the time. All of us are employees many of us are employees at some point in our lives, but you can't let that be all of what you are economically, right? At the end of the day, you have to be in those three pillars of wealth: stock and bond investing. So as Christmas comes, promise yourself right now, if you're not invested in the stock market, you're going to start now. Start today. You can download Acorns, Stash, or Robinhood, one of those three apps, and start investing tomorrow. You can start with just $5 and just have some amount. I don't care if it's $2 a week. Or have some amount that's automatically deposited into your stock portfolio so you can begin that process. Same thing when it comes to real estate. If you can't afford to buy property, just at least learn how. It doesn't cost you anything to learn how to buy property, right? Entrepreneurship, same thing. And if you ever want to check out the Black Business School, we have everything you need. We have black professors that got tired of their jobs at white universities and came and worked with us, and they're teaching every single week every single thing that you'd ever want to know, along with companies like the Black Upstart, Jay Morrison's academies here. All of us are basically building new systems and building a new nation that will allow us to educate our own at the highest levels. And that's what we need as a community. That's what's going to make us great. So we got to get away from the nonsense and start building up our dollars and cents. All right. Thank you guys very much for the conversation. I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Dr. Watkins.
Good morning.
First of all, I have a statement and I have a question. First and foremost, my name is Cleon Peoples. I came down from Washington, D.C. I was 50-50 as far as attending this conference. But when I saw your name on it,
Here we are, clan the isms, cataclysm great. Our people out here struggling, trying to make it in this state. Everybody out here doing it, but we the ones who late. Now family, we the ones who gotta delegate. Get that money in the power, never be fake. Stick to cosign for 3. What did he say? Create jobs, support our own. Educate the same and buy back your home. Got 3 degrees, Triple 10, 3 PhDs, now we on the CNN. DBTV, let's talk about negligence. Ignorance is bliss, but we can turn it to intelligence. Believe none of what you hear, half of what you see. Let's break it down here on Dr. Boyce TV.